Hey everybody, welcome to Forgetting Walls. We want to welcome you this week with a little impromptu intro. We got a special guest this week. Talk a little music, a little church. Okay, let me take that back. A lot of music and a little church. And Justin had a few issues coming in this week with his feed, and he sounds a little bit like he was squeezed through a digitizer. That shouldn't be any issues. You still will hear him. Thank you. Love you. Let's get started with the show. Hey everybody, I'm Keith.
And I'm Justin.
And we want to welcome you to Forgetting Walls. And man, it is episode 3. Can you believe we made 3 episodes already? Oh my goodness. Justin, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. Haven't really been productive at all. I've just been around my apartment, kind of hanging out, playing Skyrim, getting books together, getting ready for the next semester.
So basically you've been a lazy bum all week playing video games.
Kind of.
Yeah, it kind of figures to me. But we got something special this week. I guess you already know what the special is this week because you can see it. But but yeah, we're going to do something a little bit different this week with the episode. We're inviting a guest on. We think in a lot of the things that we're doing here at Forgetting Walls, we want to, everything needs to be real. So we're going to bring real people on. If we can bring celebrities on, yay, but we really want to focus on real people. And this week we got a special guest co-host with us, and it's my good friend Andy Austin. Andy, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Andy. How are you? Hi, Justin.
Hi, Andy.
Hello.
So we're going to spend some time talking about some different things today. This week Justin's got his pet peeve article for the week. We may discuss a little sports, which having Andy here will help me out a lot because Justin only likes mascots. So, so we're going to see what Justin picks determining mascots this week.
Stay tuned.
Also, we're going to probably dig into a lot of musical items this week. Talk about worship music. Versus secular music, what's good for Christians, what's not good for Christians, what's good for anybody, maybe just talking about nothing, just about music in general. So what else is going on there, Justin? So is it cold up in your part of the state?
It is so freaking cold here. It is ridiculous. I think it was 2 days ago, it got to like negative 17. Just without a wind chill, on the dash of my car, I saw it like negative 2 degrees.
Well, I told you lived in a bad place.
No, I live in a great place. It's home.
No way, man. There's no way, dude. You live in cold, and cold is not good.
Well, okay, so I'll admit, I'm a bit over the cold, and, I'm kind of ready to move somewhere a little bit warmer. But it's still a great place to live. I love this place.
I'm sure. I'm sure for people who like the mountains, it's a good place to live. Andy was a northern person at one point. It must have got cold in your neck of woods as well.
It did. I was in Vermont for a little while, and that's very cold. That's Canada cold. So
yeah, well, I'll never go to Vermont. Well, I take that back. I've been to Maine once.
Even colder.
Yeah, and it was weird because when I went to Maine, it was like September. And it was one of those times of my many work-related craziness as I was driving, an 18-wheeler up and down the coast with this guy. And we, in North Carolina during September, it's like 90 degrees. Yeah. So we hop in the truck and you got a delivery and we're taking it to somewhere in Maine, which is absolutely the furthest north I've ever been at that point in my life. Yeah, at that point in my life, the furthest north I've been.
Yeah.
And we got up to Maine, and it was like 33 degrees in September. I couldn't comprehend that. It was, I wanted to say, why didn't somebody tell me? Because, of course, I'm driving a truck in flip-flops shorts and tank tops. When I get up there, I don't have any jackets.
That's right. You didn't pack accordingly.
No
so-
jeans, no boots. So
Yeah.
it was a horrible experience. So yeah, cold sucks, man.
That's
and
right.
hey, if you live in the cold, I apologize.
If
You
you
might
love
like
it,
it.
that's right.
Yeah, if you like it, man.
Sorry.
We're praying for you.
That's right.
But yeah, so it got to. I woke up. Was it Thursday morning? And it was. Well, when I woke up at the house, it was like 23 degrees. But by the time I got to work, which is weird because I'm driving south, it was 16 degrees when I got to
Yeah.
Socastee. So yeah, when I got to work that morning, it was 16 degrees, and that's I don't care, dude. After you pass like 32, it's just cold. I don't. It all registers as cold to me. So I don't know about you, but I can do without it. I'll move to Florida and be done with it.
Amen.
Well, you guys can have Florida.
Yeah, whatever. You know you'd love Florida all the time, every day. Especially if you lived in Orlando and got to do Disney World every day. Come on now.
Okay, Disney World is like one of the redeeming facts of Florida.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on. I mean, that may be the only thing that makes Florida on Sundays for me. No, man. Hey, okay, so we were listening to the podcast last week. Me and Kim, we drive back and forth to work. And it's a long drive for us, 45 minutes. So we get to listen to the podcast. And so we're listening to the podcast last week. And at the end of the podcast, me and Justin had a little tiff because I outroed him and my name at the same time. And he was a little, wiry about it. And then
I wasn't mad. You just need to let me do my own intro. Or outro.
Well, hey, have all you want. But I mean, he did get the full outro, and when he finished it up, and he goes into his little, thank you for visiting, or thank you for listening to Forgetting Walls. Kim goes, he's got a real good radio voice. He sounds like he should be on the radio. And then the next line out of her mouth was, you ready for this? He sounds like the guys that are like at the end of the medicine commercials, and side effects are.
Really?
So,
Side effects include nausea, vomiting.
See
That's
what I'm
exactly
saying? It's
right,
perfect.
that's
See, I don't have a radio voice. I don't even have a voice that should be on anywhere.
I don't either. So.
I mean, I listen to myself. I hate listening to
No, it's
myself.
horrible. It's
horrible.
horrible. I
And
know.
Andy's gonna get the treatment this week, especially when he goes home. He'll listen to the podcast Monday or Tuesday with the family, and I'm sure the little girls will be laughing at him. Which, by the way, brings up another pretty good story that I got to tell. I mean, it was so interesting. Matter of fact, hold on. Let Andy tell the story because it comes better from the guy who was there at it. So you were sitting at dinner and y'all were listening to the podcast, and what happened?
Right. We're at the dinner table. We have the iPad, and we're listening to the broadcast, the podcast, and my daughter Shannon, who's 9 years old, she hears it, and she knows we're very good friends, the Wilsons and the Austins. So Shannon says, Dad, that's Keith. Yeah, I said, yeah, Keith has a podcast now. And Keith happened to be talking about New Year's Eve. We were over on New Year's Eve and did some dancing around the living room, things like that. The girls heard their names referenced, and Shannon looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, we're famous."
And I thought it was like just the craziest thing because I'm like, I never mentioned a name. I never said, but of course
Right.
she was there at the party.
That's right.
And she related with that, and I thought it was cool. So let's just make it official this week. Shannon and Paige, you're officially named on the podcast.
You're famous.
You're now officially famous.
You're now infamous in the internet world.
That's right.
So yeah, it was a pretty good thing. So something else cool that happened this week. We did get a few responses on the Facebook site, which was cool. A friend of ours kind of messaged in and said that she really liked what was going on. And we need all the support we can get, honestly, because, some days I'm going, what are we doing? What are we really doing? But the best one of the week, we got an email, and it was a kind of special email. And it was so special that I had to wait to tell Justin because, see, unfortunately, Justin doesn't look at the email account. So, and maybe he does, or maybe I told him, but I don't know. But I had to wait for the show to really just bring it out. But so we get an email, and it's like, just finished listening to the first podcast. Great job, guys. I can't wait to see what God is going to do through the ministry. Thank you for allowing your time and talents to be used by Him to minister to the needs of others. Tear down those walls and keep building the bridge. So I was like, that's so cool. And I wasn't putting two and two together. So I'm like, man, that is just an awesome email. I really like his uplifting and everything. And I didn't pay attention to the name. And then I noticed the name was Sherry Davis.
Woo! Come on!
So what was great is that last week I said, so Justin, you got any shout outs? And he's like, yeah. Shout out to my mom.
Told you she was awesome.
So yeah, Justin's mom gave us a nice little encouraging email, which is good. Hey, all the emails we can get, comments, go to the website, comment on the podcast there if you want. Hit us up on Twitter, all those things. You hear about all that at the end of the show. But yeah, any of those things that we can gather up will make us feel a whole lot better at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, wow. Anything else going on this week? I mean, work was the cold days at work. I just can't get over that, man. It's just when I know it was only one day, but it was so brutal cold.
It was
ridiculous. But this week, Justin should have a couple of, or at least one blog on the site.
Yep.
Be looking forward to that. His first submission, adding to our website there. So I don't know. Do we get right into the beef of the things today? Do we?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Go for it.
So Justin came up with a topic of talk for this week. So I'm going to let him roll the introduction on that. And
all right. So I figured that this week, especially since we have Andy, we could talk about music, because all of us are musicians in some way or another. Me, doing vocals and being involved in a lot of worship bands and all that. Keith learning guitar and playing also with worship, and Andy playing drums, and I'm sure I don't even know your whole musical history, so that'd be interesting.
Oh my gosh, dude! For real, that'd be a great little segment right now, just to get Andy to tell us about his musical journey.
Yeah,
there's some pretty good stuff in there.
Yeah, it's
that
interesting. That's for sure. Yeah,
definitely banter on for a couple of minutes.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Andy. So give us a little history on your musical upbringing, maybe.
All right. Well, I started playing drums out of high school. Took lessons from a jazz guy. Kind of wanted to be a rock star. Didn't get on with any bands right away. I was living in Vermont at the time. Ended up moving to New York where my dad was. And there's music all over New York. So I had a cousin who was 4 years older than myself, and he was kind of a musical mentor to myself and my brother and some other friends that we had who were playing. So we kind of studied under him for a while, and
Gotcha.
he raised us up on the blues, classic rock, and things like that. And then myself, my brother, my best friend, and two other guys formed a band down in the suburbs of Manhattan, and kind of played around Westchester County for a while. Shout
Nice.
out to Westchester.
How old were you at this point?
I was in my mid-20s at this point.
Okay.
So you still weren't born yet, Justin.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. I'm not sure. Since I'm old, yeah, that may be true. But this is kind of like the height of grunge, if you will.
Ooh.
So we're talking a lot of Nirvana and Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, things like that, Alice in Chains. And we covered all that stuff, and we played college bars all over, like New Rochelle and some other places. And that lasted a few years, and then I got my best friend, who's Filipino, was the guitar player in those bands with me. And I ended up getting involved with him in a Filipino rock band. And yeah, you can imagine how that looked. It sounded great, which was great. And we kind of played all over, like Queens. We did some stuff in New Jersey and New York City and things like that. And
Now, is there footage or demo tapes or
We have to
recordings
find something.
Yeah.
that we can find of this?
Andy has a demo.
Oh my gosh, we will get this.
We will find it. Internet, go out and find this.
I'm going to
Yeah.
find this.
I think I have one of maybe 5 copies in the entire universe, so I can bring that.
What was the
And
name of the band?
The name of the band was Daisy Chain. And
All right.
I know a lot of you Filipinos in Queens, you know what I'm talking about. So Daisy Chain was fairly popular in and around the circuit. So we had a great time, and like I said, that lasted for a while as well. We cut our demo, played a bunch of clubs all over the place, and we everybody drifted apart. My buddy ended up moving down to South Carolina. I'm here in North Carolina with y'all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been
He-
been great.
Hey, being from up north, he hits the y'all just right, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a reformed Yankee now, so it's 8+ years now down here.
You've been speaking about your, coming up through it, and it's definitely a lot of secular music play. But really, I know that you're a Christian now. That's basically how me and you got to know each other.
That's right.
I guess outside of maybe your story of coming to know Jesus, maybe about really what got you into the side of worship music.
I didn't really know that much about worship music. The only time that I had taken any interest in it to begin with was probably about 15 years ago. And at that point, it was very soft and very easy listening, kind of,
Yeah.
it's hard
So,
to explain,
not
almost
good.
like soft rock, pop, almost like ballady type.
REO Speedwagon, Air Supply.
I believe they rocked even a little bit harder than some of the stuff that I heard. So, and my reaction was, "This is Christian music." Well, I have nothing to listen to here, so I'll stick with Van Halen, Motley Crue, Megadeth, Metallica, whatever I was listening to, at the time, and
Don't blame you.
Yeah, I can say a few choice words about the music then too.
Yeah, it wasn't where it is now.
No, by no means.
There's so much available now. It's great, and I got turned on to it probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and have progressed from like a lot of Caleb stuff.
Yeah.
Keith has turned me on to some harder things that I enjoy listening to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're big Disciple fans.
Gosh, love Disciple. Disciple.
Yeah, that's kind of where it is now.
So yeah, on top of that, I guess how me and Andy met was because of, well, I wouldn't say because of music, but it really solidified our relationship more than anything else. I was serving at a church and helping out there with the youth ministry, and I met Andy on a trip, so to speak, to retreat, and got to know each other there, but really spent some time afterwards. He'd come out to the youth services and hang out, and the church at that time, or that the place that we were going at the time, didn't have a worship band, and we kind of were saying, hey, let's do something, and we kind of threw together some people that could play some instruments, and we brought some people in that could sing, and mainly my daughter, and Justin even participated in that that adventure as well, and Andy played the drums for us, and it really grew because it was fun to play together. I love playing in that format worshipfully, but I like playing other music too. Don't get me wrong, I love the punk and the grunge. I love playing those genres of music. But it really solidified mine and Andy's chemistry, not just as bandmates, but more along the lines as friends and family and everything else through that. So, just like today, I think, where we're going with music, maybe not just what it looks like on either side of the ball. Look, here we go, people. Can't talk today. On either side of the wall, but really how I really want to focus on, I don't know about you, Justin and Andy, but I really want to focus on how people put such a negative and positive light on music, like, oh, it's Christian or it's evil or this, that, or the other, when I just want to focus on that music in itself is amoral. There's no morality to music except for the message that may come across in it. But I think people take too much as far as like musically, not lyrically, but musically. They place too much emphasis on the good and evil of it instead of looking how, I mean, look at what it does. I mean, music is probably one of the greatest things that draws people together, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe we can spend a little time talking about that as well. But you know, like I said, me and Andy and Justin, the funny thing is we all sit here and talk about music because we all love music. We all perform some part of music, and we have all played music together, which is really cool. And you know, that was one of the main reasons I really wanted to get Andy on with us, is because, well, he knows us and he's interesting. So
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And
That's
just
an
a little
accident,
short
by the
thing.
way.
Like, I remember the first time I ever heard about Andy was you, Keith. You actually told me that you had met this guy, or like, you know, you had been at the church, and that you met this guy, and he was like, you were just like, yeah, he's one of the most like real, genuine, like, you know, nicest people you ever meet, and just like so laid back, and he's an amazing drummer. And I remember going in there and meeting Andy for the first time, and I was like, I could get along with this guy pretty well. And then I heard him play drums, and I'm like, yep, this guy, yep.
yeah.
Oh, you guys are too much. Thank you.
But I mean,
You had some oomph in those some of those hits.
yeah, it's definitely a early rock style of drumming. He
Oh, yeah.
And that was the thing, you know, is like I love, you know, when you go to theaters or, you know, actors are coming in, and especially in like Broadway type of situations or plays, the actors need to be big, and you always want them to be. You never want to have to tell an actor to go big. You want to have to pull them back. So I think in anything in life, you don't want to have to get people to do more. You want to have to pull them back. So, and with Andy, it was always like that, because, you know, playing praise and worship music in a very small setting, it was all like, okay, Andy, I need you to pull back just a little bit, because I don't care how loud we turn up the amps, nobody could hear anything but Andy killing those drums.
And then we got those little foam things that
gosh.
do anything. They're placed in all the wrong positions to absorb sound.
That was my
That
favorite.
was window dressing. That did nothing.
That was my
That was,
favorite thing.
that was just aesthetics. That's all that was for.
That's exactly right.
I walked in and saw the foam cushion. I was like, you need to put that on every inch of this room to absorb the sound. It was so good.
I needed a foam suit back there behind the plexiglass,
But yeah, it was a great time playing music together, in which me and Andy will probably play a little music this afternoon after we get done with the podcast, just because I got some punk stuff. I just want some drums background too. But yeah, you know, and maybe going back to what we just started talking about, you know, we get into these, and I guess, you know, we're all coming from it from I would say a Christian perspective, but because we are Christians. But I don't want to label anything Christian, because, you know, like I think when we first started the podcast, me and Justin both said, now people, we are Christians. We're two guys who are Christians, but this podcast in of itself is not a Christian podcast, because I feel that's oxymoronic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're applying something that doesn't really mean that to it, because it can't be that. Like, you know, music can't be, I mean, we can label it Christian music, but it's not Christian, because music and podcasts and books, they may be performed or written or recorded by Christians, but those things have no souls. Those things can't be saved, you know. So maybe that's a good vocabulary segment too. You know, we'll talk about sometime about the word Christian, but as for today, you know, I see it as music that's performed by Christians. You know, if we're talking about Christian music, are we talking about praise and worship? Are we talking about guys like, you know, Toby Mac or Skillet or Red or Disciple? Man, throw out anybody you want that's considered a Christian artist, and does that necessarily make their music Christian?
Right.
You know, because I think
just
about...
by value of who they are.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some other guys?
And then you get into a sort of conundrum, you know, with the whole, I guess, Christian metal community, like, you know, with the As I Lay Dying.
Yeah, exactly.
Where, you know, it was a quote-unquote Christian band, depending on who you asked.
Right.
And then, you know, something like what happened to Tim Lambesis happened.
Exactly.
And everything falls apart. And you're like, wait, but I thought this was a Christian band. And that's what made it I think, even more, I guess, scandalous in
Well, yeah.
magazines or whatever, because they're like, oh, because all the magazines had like Christian frontman, you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
Yeah.
plots to murder his wife, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
and it's having that label of being that Christian band.
Well, yeah, and I think it's if you look at other bands who didn't have an episode like the whole Tim Lambesis thing, you know, which is tragic, but I think that's what happens. You know, these bands like Under Oath, MXPX, Reliant K, these earlier bands who were not jumping on a bandwagon of other music, or like Emery, you know, all these guys. They were playing music. Now, some of them were adding Jesus into their songs, but there was this concept that because these guys are Christian or because they love Jesus, that they labeled them Christian. And a lot of these bands couldn't live up to the pedestal nature of what people were doing to them, this hero type of concept. And I hear it a lot on other podcasts, and one in particular, you know, the guys from Emery talk a lot about this. You know, they talk about how, you know, everybody's looking at you to be this hero, to make this statement, to give the gospel and do all these things. But, you know, these guys are like, we're just here to play music. So it made me think a lot about music in of itself, and why do Christians need to attach themselves to these people and then make them so popular in the Christian field, which I think is backwards to the gospel in how we should be living. We place these people into icon statuses, to idol statuses. You know,
right.
Because, oh, they're Christian and it's Christian music and it's good. I mean, there's a lot of good music out there, but the problem is that we're trying to place morality on top of it, so we have this segregation of music. And for me, there's a lot of better music, or a lot better music, on the other side of the walls of the church than there is on the inside the walls of the church, and that's what drives me crazy.
Yeah, and I totally agree, because I remember when people told me, like, oh, you should only listen to Christian music, or you should only listen to music that glorifies Jesus, which I do believe that everything we do should glorify God. However, I remember just being like, really? So I have to give up all this awesome music? Like, I have to, like, stop listening to all this great art?
Yeah, yeah.
And consume what I considered, like, I guess, lesser well-made art.
Right.
And so I remember being like, really? Is that what we have to do?
Well, I was also thinking I was that person at one point. I mean, I think it's a development.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, I think it was a development process, though, of being a Christian, like being a disciple of Jesus. You know, which I think this is a detriment to Christians. You know, we go through these phases of where we're so hardcore Christian and so hardcore Bible and morality that we don't look at how it negatively affects those around us who don't believe in Christ, or even young people who believe in Christ and don't understand really what we're trying to say, because we haven't grown to a place where we can articulate, you know, what we're really trying to get forth. Like, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, I just think about and let's just take an extreme. I'm like, I don't want people to listen to Gwar. I mean, I don't want people to listen to Gwar if they're like not Christian. I mean, their music disturbs me. So you know,
right.
But on the flip side, is like, you know, I was trying to replace like genre or genres of music with like Christian music that was in that genre. So like, if you like punk music, I've been like, oh, I listen to Reliant K or MXPX, you know. And if you like stuff like, you know, just like rock stuff, listen to Disciple. You know, if you like heavy hardcore, Suicidal Tendencies, or Cannibal Corpse, stuff like that. You know, Slayer. You know, you can listen to ABR, you know, Prada stuff. And I started thinking about that stuff. I was like, man, maybe that's the wrong attitude to take in it. And now I'm like, I just listen to music because it's music, because I don't think music in of itself. I mean, there may be some messages there, but I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah,
music is. For some people, music pushes emotional buttons. For other people, they just enjoy loud guitars and drums. I mean, it's, you know, you kind of can, I guess, burn off some aggression without being aggressive by listening to that kind of music, which is kind of a vehicle for me that way. Mm-hmm. Because although I tend to be, I wouldn't say reserved, my musical tastes are harder, because that's my outlet for that kind of feeling and emotion.
talking about harder music, and I know I may have got a little off topic on the Guar situation, but I just remember seeing those videos, and I'm like, I was disturbed as a child. But just like that little bit we heard from Jesus Culture right there, you hear that, and I mean, I love. Don't get me wrong, I love praise and worship music. I mean, I absolutely do. I just think it's a special part of like of a service or being among other people who like believe the same, and you're all there for one purpose. I love that, but I think it's in the church circles, it's just been taken like overboard with how they look at other music, and not only just other music, but how they look at other people that listen to other music. That's what disturbs me more than anything else.
Right. Yeah, and I think, at least for me, that you kind of get in this mindset that, so don't get me wrong, I love the music that's corporate worship, those hymns, contemporary music. I love those. Mm-hmm. However, I listen to a lot of other kinds of music. And I feel like it's this sort of mentality that you have to have this corporate music everywhere. You apply that standard across the board.
Right.
And anyone who's not doing that is not really, quote-unquote, Christian.
Yeah, exactly. I call it the K-Love syndrome. I hate to throw that out there, but that's what I call it. It's the K-Love syndrome. It's like, I remember, okay, I got a story for you. Here you go. So one Sunday morning, where I was the youth pastor at, I would sit in on the middle school Sunday school class. Particularly, we won't go into the Sunday school theology I have, but I was sitting in there because we had some new teachers, so I'd go in and sit in and see how they were doing and see how the class reacted and see if they could really adapt to the curriculum that we had there. So one morning they were talking about some music or a song or something, and I don't listen to K-Love. Now, when I first was a Christian, I did because that's what everybody did, right. In the kind of the beginning, or when you was getting into Christian music, you listen to K-Love all the time. But I had grown way far away from that because basically I've heard every song K-Love have ever played, and they were replaying them again. But
it's not hard to do.
No. I mean, it's just another radio station. All radio stations do it, so it's not just K-Love that does it. But, I mean, I was like, I wanted something more. I wanted new music. And, like, there was so many other great outlets, especially, I meant, for praise and worship music or music that was, more about God. There were so many other bands out there that weren't getting played on the radio. Right. So I wanted, and I'm an indie fan. But one morning we were sitting in there, and I think they was talking about a Chris Tomlin song or somebody's song. And I had no idea what that song was. And, and I'm participating in the class like the kids are because that's what I do. I really want to see and interact with the teacher. So she said, so who's heard this song? And I'm like, of course I didn't raise my hand. And she's like, Keith, you haven't heard this song? And I'm like, no, I haven't. She goes, but it's on K-Love. And I was like, I don't listen to K-Love. And she goes, you don't listen to K-Love? And I'm like, no, I don't listen to K-Love. I mean, what's the problem with that? Right. So I was like, but that's what I realized, that Christians think, and whether it's K-Love or whatever radio station that's let's throw it out there, a Christian radio station that plays Christian genre type of music. Yeah. When you say you don't listen to those things or you listen to something else, you're like, it's the kibosh, man. You got the KOD put on you, and it's like, it's crazy that people on that side of the wall, the church wall side, think that way. It's like, it's like you're a bad person or you're a sinner or something. And I think that's how a lot of people think in the Christian world. So it blows my mind. But like I said, I couldn't believe it. If you could have seen her face when she said that, it was absolutely remarkable.
And I guess because it's more of a mainstream vehicle kind of K-Love, and it's accessible to a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
and it's easy to listen to a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are some folks that just assume everyone is listening to it who's in the Christian universe.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And when you're not,
right?
Maybe it's shocking or a surprise to some. But I mean, that's the beauty of music, though. Especially today with Christian music, you can find something that kind of speaks to you.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? There's so many different genres, if you want to call them.
Well, let me, I don't know, let me ask you a question too. Is it a problem? You know, does it strike you weird that you, I guess, as a Christian, are expected to listen to a certain type of music or a certain genre of music, or you have to cut in certain? I mean, I think about groups like, you know, and not that I'm a big Beatles fan, but I think about the Beatles and I think about Elvis.
Yeah.
I think about like B.B. King. I mean, you think about like Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think about all these people, and you know, of course, Elvis is going to get his props because he did a couple of gospel songs. But
Yeah.
come on, you know, if you look at, you know, you think about Elvis as a person, he was just a human being. Like he wasn't no perfect pedestal person, but
No,
because he
not at
sang a
all.
couple gospel songs,
Yeah.
well, I can listen to Elvis.
Yeah.
But I think about bands like, you know, like I said, Led Zeppelin
Yeah.
or the Beatles, who weren't technically, I mean, come on, the Beatles for real, like John Lennon, you know, he was not a Christian. He kind of stood against the whole idea of organized religion.
Right.
And because he had that mind frame or that outlook on life, should I not listen to his music, even though, I mean, they were great at what they did, and they opened a whole new like section of how music should be done.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and to take it one step further, there's this whole sort of mindset within, I guess, kind of church circles or whatever, and a lot of people I've talked to, and that I just see, where if a band is like non-Christian, like most of their songs don't have anything to do with Jesus or Christ or
Yeah.
you know, the gospel or anything like that, then say the band comes out with like one song, like say Mumford and Sons, they mention
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah,
one
exactly,
time,
exactly.
and everybody's all over that. Like,
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
I can listen to
absolutely.
Mumford and Sons.
No, I agree.
And, however, you have other bands, you say like, you know, Gungor,
Oh yeah.
where you know they, you know, have gospel themes and creation and all that stuff, and then they come out with the newest album, which is not a quote unquote Christian album.
Yeah.
Yet everyone like attacks it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's well, when it comes to Gungor, there may be a little bit more involved in it, which still has nothing to, you know, it has nothing to do with it. But I agree. Like, I think about like, and let's go from like a very, you know, orchestrated music to like rap. Like I think about DMX, because DMX had that one like, let's call it gospel rap song where he talks about Jesus through the whole thing. And I love DMX. Don't get me wrong. I thought when DMX came out, I was like, I love DMX. I followed DMX. I mean, I loved his music. It wasn't great Christian music at all, but there's this one song, right? That just, it's like, dude, I could live and die in my faith with this song by the way he produced it, what he talked about. I mean, it was just a good song about God, about Jesus, right? And if you want to find it, you can check it out. Just, you know, Google DMX Christian song and you'll find it. But but it's like, you know, and then, you know, people say, well, is he a Christian? Is he not a Christian? And I'm like, are you judging him for his salvation based off the music he produces? Is that a valid way to look at somebody's heart? I mean, I don't know, but you're right, you know, and people get on that bandwagon. And maybe not just Gungor, but think about I mean the most notable one here lately is Jennifer Knapp. I mean, look at, you know, she was the big, you know, Christian contemporary music artist for so long, and then, you know, she has this revelation that, you know, I don't really see things the way other Christians do. Her music stops being, you know, like the contemporary Christian music, and she's just making music. But then again, with her lifestyle choice or what she decides to do, people are like, I guess, throwing stones at her. You know, so
Right.
I think for me, it has less to do with about the music, the art of music for people, especially in Christian circles. And it's more about the morality of the person or what's being said in those songs.
Right. Which even I think the lyrics are, God, how do I say this? Whatever. I'll just go for it. The lyrics of a lot of modern Christian bands are very drab, to say. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of nowadays. There's a lot of really creative artists who are doing really different things. But you know, the mainstream is just all kind of the same lyrical content.
Right.
And, you know, being a lyricist, I'd really like to see within the Christian world a lot more creativity and a lot more risk being taken within lyrics.
No, I agree.
Are you talking in terms of like taking on worldly issues as opposed to going on about like your faith?
Well, I mean, yeah, worldly issues, I guess so. But more so about like admitting that you struggle with faith,
Oh yeah.
admitting that, kind of opening that conversation. You know what we're doing now.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why, like, when it comes to him, I tend to kind of go more toward reformed, you know, hymns.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, even in worship, I'll be sitting there and, you know, singing, you know, that, oh, my heart's on fire for God, and all that I do is look for you, God. And I feel really dishonest. And it's when I can sing, you know, that, look, I am a sinner. Yes, I am messed up, that I have these problems, and I often doubt, Lord, help me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And so that's where.
yeah, and no, I agree because I think about I'm not a big hymn person, mainly because I don't like how it's delivered because it's, you know, but the content or the context of those songs
Yeah.
had depth to them. You know, it wasn't just some random thrown together. Now, don't get me wrong. I like corporate praise and worship in giant settings because it's really easy to get into that place with God and to worship. But when it comes to music overall, I think the lyrical content for me is, and I'm going to go for it too, Justin. I think it's a little childish. You
Yes.
know, it's there's not a lot of depth to it. Now, there are some songs that I listen to, and I think about a band like, okay, Disciples not considered a praise and worship band,
Right.
but the content
Right.
of the lyrics shows brokenness, shows
Struggle
redemption.
with life. Yeah.
There's a lot of that in it, and that's what I really like about it. But on the flip side, talking about lyrics, talking about how songs are done, you listen to a lot of like Christian music. There's a lot of ambiguity in the lyrics to where sometimes if you just throw them on a regular radio station and you didn't know who this person was, you might not know that they're singing to God at all.
It could be their girlfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. I was watching. Oh my gosh, there was this black pastor, man, and he was killing. He was a soulful guy, right? And I was watching on YouTube, and he goes, "Man, you can take any song, and if you tell somebody the object of the song, that it would change the whole meaning of the song." And he was taking some of these old R&B Motown hits,
Right.
and he's like, "Think about if the object of this was God," and he'd sing these songs.
Yeah, sure.
And you're
Absolutely.
like, "Oh man, it's one of the greatest gospel songs ever." But it was all about how the content and the context of that song came because of what or who you were singing to or about.
Right. The object, like, of the affection, whatever it was, it's like a woman or a man
Right.
or whatever. Yeah, I could see that. You know, honestly, I've done that before, just listening to music, where you could only, like you say, the lyrics are so ambiguous, you're listening to it and you think to yourself, you know, they could very easily be singing about God
No, yeah.
as opposed to a love interest, you know, or whatever.
Yeah. What was it? In the early days, we had a Tuesday night young adult thing, and in the early days of it, when it first started, we actually played a lot of what Christians would call secular songs.
Yeah.
But we just played music. And we'd play a lot of Foo Fighters, you know, My Hero,
Oh, yeah,
and, you know,
absolutely,
Everlong
yeah.
and things
Even,
like that.
Even some of those songs.
Yeah.
Same
Now,
thing.
of course, I know Dave Grohl is not going to sit up in his bed and go, "Yep, that's what I was doing. I meant for Christians to use
Yeah,
this in that
right.
in that atmosphere." But I mean, you know, but the level of artistry that's in that music and how deep, you know, whether people want to see how deep those lyrics are, you know, I think a lot of people overlook the content of music or the lyrics because of maybe how it's produced. Like, you know, I remember one time on Facebook I posted the lyrics to a For Today song. And I was like, man, I love the lyrics to this song, and I posted the lyrics. And of course, I got like hundreds of likes and people commenting, "Oh, that's so praise God," and this, that, and the other.
But then they listen to it and they're like,
and then I posted the video, and they're like, and it says, just like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, and they're like, oh my gosh, what is this, right?
Exactly. Right.
So it was just one of those things. It's like, I don't think people are driven. It's back and forth. I don't think people really care about the lyrics as much as what they care about their genre of style.
Yeah, the delivery.
Yeah, the delivery of it. Because I mean, it's just it just blows my mind, because I'll listen to people, people's music, and I'm listening to their lyrics, especially I would say people who are Christians making music, and I'm listening to those lyrics, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the struggle that you hear in the music, and then I listen to like your average K-Love song, and it's nice and all, but some of those songs are just, I feel they're a little void of content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just, one of those things where you say, well, what do I really need to do when I'm listening? Or what do I really need to listen to? How do I judge it? I mean, does it really matter what you listen to as a Christian? I mean, if we're speaking on the Christian side.
And before people maybe judge the music on what it sounds like and who it may be directed at, I think it's important to realize that music is a gateway. It can be a gateway for people to reach them, and bring them to know Christ, or help them find Jesus,
Right.
Because there's some hardcore stuff out there, and there's a lot of young kids out there, young people out there, who are looking for an invitation. You know what I mean?
Coming off what Andy was saying was, talking about how music's the gateway. Looking at a church like New Spring Church, where they do, like, they open a lot of their services up with, like, quote unquote secular songs. I remember I used to attend New Spring for a little bit, and they when I stopped going because of the distance we were traveling, I would watch their services online, and I would watch them at work sometimes when I was working at the computer shop. And they opened up. They had this series. I think the series was called Redneck or something. It was a country theme, and but they opened their services up with one of the I've Got Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the reaction that I got from people hearing that song was like, "Wow, they play that in church." And I'm like, so my question is what is your take on that?
All right. Well, I mean, there's this whole thing where, a few years ago, you had Perry Noble had a lot of flack coming to him because, he played Highway to Hell
on the Easter service.
At the beginning of a service.
It was the Easter service.
Yeah.
Though. that was the best thing about it.
And I don't know, my views have changed a lot back and forth about that, because I like the fact that it's secular music. It could be bringing people in, but at the same time, I do hold that there should be a certain amount of reverence, and there should be a certain amount of, within. I don't know. It's a tough thing. I think as long as it's being, and this is a tough thing to try to gauge. But as long as the music is being used to glorify God,
right,
then I'm okay with it. But the question is, where does that line fall? Because you could play almost anything and be like, oh yeah, well, just doing it for the glory of God, and it's a very tough thing to try to balance.
Well, and I asked this question in general, specifically about, because Andy's talking about a gateway, and their reasoning is that, if somebody who comes into our church is not a Christian and you play all Christian music, how do they identify with that?
Right.
It's, and I understand the reasoning, and I really do. And not that I fall one side or the other on this situation. It's just, I thought the concept that, if you bring a person who doesn't know anything about Jesus or God or church, and they hear that song that they know and they resonate with, do you think that's a good strategy? I mean, and since we're talking about music, do you think it's a good strategy in of itself? Because a lot of people will tell you that's just not possible because you don't do that in church.
I guess for me, if you could somehow tie your message into it,
Yeah.
then it may work. Otherwise, I think in some cases it just seems out of place.
Yeah.
Like it's done, I guess, almost not for shock value as much as just to kind of take people out of their comfort zone.
Well, yeah, and I thought about it too. That and it's an attractional model. I mean, that's what attractional churches do. You got attractional churches, you got missional churches, you got institutional churches, you got all types of churches. But I think that's the role of an attractional church. They're trying to attract people to that place that normally wouldn't come. And, come on. You're playing AC/DC, Highway to Hell, as your opening song for Easter. Now, I'm sure he could. I'm sure he was able to tie in the message part of it. But, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I mean, it's your place. Let me ask you this question, Justin. Do you think that people place or put their position in the stance that the building that they're in is the house of God, and it should have, like you were saying, this type of reverence? And
I totally think that's a factor in it. But also, I think for me, it's kind of comparing these two different ways of reaching the lost.
Mm-hmm.
Is it playing music that a potentially non-Christian who walks through the door will come in, sort of bringing the secular into the sacred,
right?
Or is it doing like a lot of other bands are doing, like For Today and all them who are preaching, from the stage, and bring kind of their going into the world,
right?
And so there's that difference there of which preferable, which one, it's sort of this balance, and it's sort of a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on that.
Well, yeah, I agree.
And so, but yeah, I definitely think, to answer your original question, that that's sort of being a place, this is where God lives, that's very ingrained within, Judeo-Christian history, having a place where God especially is.
Right.
And so I think that definitely plays a huge role in why people get so upset.
But if we're looking at, really speaking to bridge these gaps, don't you think it's a good place to start with Christians to remind them that, God doesn't live in a building? It's just, I think that's my, as a Christian, my biggest problem with Christians is that they don't understand that, God dwells with us and not in that building, because when we leave that building, where's God?
Right.
That's my issue. So I think a lot of issues are just solved with understanding the deficiency we have in our understanding about God and church and all those things. Where I understand why a non-Christian has those misunderstandings, because they're not a part of our social club or whatever you want to call it, Right. But for us on the other side, for the Christian side of things, is it, maybe what I'm saying is it something that shouldn't be done, or is it something that is a strategy that can work?
I think it's a strategy that can work, but I think it just depends on person to person, because not everyone is in the same place in their faith. And so, it's, expecting, all Christians to sort of, I guess, in a way, see the way that we see it, and sort of be like, yeah, the church is in a building, so screw the building, in a way.
Yeah.
I think that, by doing that, it's doing the same thing that the other culture is doing. It's making us sort of the arbiter of what should be done, and it's making us, in a way, be like, okay, well, you just need to grow in your faith in that, because a lot of people are at different places in their faith, and it needs to be sort of, I think, done with love and gentleness, and be able to bring people into understanding, and like we're doing here, have dialogue and be able to disagree with one another. Because I might see someone and they're like, yeah, I'm totally up for playing all this, different kinds of music in church, and there might be another person who's not at that point and may just be like, I think that it should be, reverent and, with hymns and stuff like that. And I don't think either of them is particularly wrong. It's just different ways of doing it and different approaches.
Yeah,
that might be very postmodern of me, but
Maybe, but we live in a postmodern society, right?
All right.
I think for some people, like you were saying, Justin, we're not all in our in our same level of faith as far as our walk with God. That could be confusing to do that unless you could tie it in to whatever message you happen to be preaching on that day, or explain to people why you did what you did, because it just seems so unorthodox and kind of out of step with what we expect, in other words, from church.
Let's take it in
which
this.
which in some cases can be good, but other cases it can really lead people to be like, okay, what is, I don't know.
Well, if it starts a dialogue, sure, then
Absolutely.
Well, let's look in this direction. Are we talking about Christians seeing that music, or are we talking about the outside world seeing that music as detrimental? Because I think what may be happening is the conversation may be dwindling to how people sitting in the church service, or that service, so to speak, that are Christians see it. What I'm thinking of is, I'm not looking at, I'm honestly, and forgive me for this, but I don't care what the Christian thinks about a certain service, because they should have that growing relationship with God outside one service a week.
Right.
I think what the problem is that, and maybe that's the biggest problem is that the ignorance really doesn't lie on the other side of the fence. The ignorance lies on our side, because we're only looking at it from how it affects us, when we should be looking at how does it affect those who don't know Jesus. Is this, does it affect the ones who don't know Jesus? Is it going to be the gateway for them to know Him? Is it going to be a way? And like you said, it does. I think there needs to be some tie into it. There should be a reason we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time people do it with that intent. But maybe we should say, if you don't like it, don't go there. But on top of that, we should say, there's a purpose for everything. Because I think there's some churches or some people, some gathering places, congregations that gather, and their whole sole benefit is to feed their little flock, and it's not about reaching out to anybody else.
Yeah.
Whereas there's some places who their whole intent is to grab more and more people that are outside the walls to see them know Jesus. In that sense, where some are just like, I call them discipleship unions, and that's it. And there's some places that are all about the evangelism. Yeah. I think there should be a good balance of both in every place. But I think for me, when I hear people, and like you're saying, like, you like the hymns, you're from the Reformation side of things, Justin, and that's great. Like I said, I don't particularly like the hymns as much. I do like them, maybe just my delivery method. But I'm thinking, if let's just say I bring some guy off the street who has no concept of God or Christ, and he's sitting there, everybody's standing in there singing these hymns or praise and worship, whatever. How does he connect with who God is through those things? I mean, or is he put on guard? Should I expect him to understand what's going on, even though it's basically an alien thing to him? You know what I'm saying? That I think for me, it's, we're talking about bridging the gaps. How do we? And I want to bridge the gaps for Christians to understand the non-Christian side of things, but how do I get the non-Christian side and bridging that gap to understand us? Because we've talked about it in the beginning, our Christianese is so confusing to the outside world. And I think it really begins with how the services are done, the music, you go in and you hear a song, I Won't Relent. Right, or you hear songs like None But Jesus, and then we're expecting these people to stand and sing with us. I think that's the expectation of every person that walks. Because you've been to a church. Come on, you've all had to been to a church where the worship leader's up at the front and they're looking out at the stage or out at the audience, and they're like, "Come on, everybody, smile, sing with me. You don't sound loud enough." And I'm thinking, well, probably because the people out here don't want to sing. They don't feel like that's their point. Right. And it's because I get where they're coming from. But it becomes less about how they're reaching people in that audience and how they feel about what's happening in the audience. Yeah.
I think that I went to traditional church services when I was young, and there was no praise and worship in those churches. And when I met you and we moved down here, a lot of it is about praise and worship and contemporary praise and worship music, which I wasn't used to. My wife wasn't, my family. It was new to us, but I think when you understand that there's more than one way to reach someone, and there's all these different methods, they serve a purpose in reaching different groups of people or whatever it may be,
Right.
then you can accept it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it just becomes an issue of you deciding what's best for you.
Right. I don't even know why we went this way with it, but I mean, I think it's a good point. You know, and I'm not saying that New Spring's the only one doing it, but of course, I was a part of the services. You know, I was I was actually a part, and basically still, to a certain degree, a part of that church. And it just, for me, it kind of changed my mentality on how we see services and how it affects those non-Christians, non-believers, you know, in coming to know Christ. Not that I'm saying, and again, I'm not, you know, pro New Spring, anti New Spring, one way or the other. It's just, you know, do you think that having that ability to transcend, you know, the building aspect and get down to the level of people makes a bigger difference than what's going on in the organized Sunday service? You know, can we use those things? Can we take things that are secular, that people think should never enter the sacred doors of our churches, and use that as a tool to bridge that gap to the non-believers, non-Christians, whatever you want to label them as, people, the people who are not in church, the people who are not, that don't know Jesus, whatever, I don't care.
Yes. That's all. Just yes. No, I mean, I totally agree. I mean,
There has to be a context.
it becomes,
I think.
it's, so what?
I said there has to be a context, I think, that you use it, you know? It can't just...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was agreeing with you. Being that, you know, there has to be a context, you know, it can't be just like randomly out of the blue. There has to be a specific purpose. And I think that purpose has to be communicated effectively. You know, like you can't just throw in a random song and people are looking around and be like, okay, well, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
You know, but there has to be
ZZ
some
Top.
sort of context and reasoning behind
It's
it.
ZZ Top.
Did they do ZZ Top? For
Yeah,
real?
they did ZZ Top. But I
wild.
think that's the purpose. I mean, and since we're using New Spring as the example, man, we're giving them plenty of marketing and advertising on this podcast, aren't we? But using them as the example, I think that's something that is communicated. I think that's, if you go into that service and you hear that and you go, what is going on here? And you're a Christian, you know, you probably don't know what's going on, but I think those things are communicated. I mean, by now, as big as New Spring has gotten, and at least in South Carolina, and to hear that, and you go into that service probably unknowingly don't know that, maybe, but that's what I'm saying. It is communicated. It's a strategy. I'm not talking about just going, hey, let's just play, you know what, for the heck of it, let's play a little Foo Fighters this morning.
Yeah.
To open up service, just whatever, but it's an actual strategy being used. And gosh, man, we're going to go so long talking about this, but I think that's the thing for me, and let's just throw New Spring out of it and that whole concept. But if music is an absolute gateway to people, I mean, it intrigues people. I think
right.
everybody in some form or fashion listens to some sort of music, and if they don't, man, come out of your shell.
Exactly.
Sorry, but come out of your shell, because music is beautiful.
Yes.
But if it is a gateway, let's just look at it from the forgetting wall side of thing, okay?
Okay.
Just from our point of view. Our purpose is to bridge this gap, this growing isolation of two groups of people that are pulling away from each other because I don't know if it's just the culture of each side not wanting to integrate, but if we say, okay, let's bridge these gaps, let's bridge these chasms that are forming because we want people to come together, you know, on differing beliefs. How do we do that with music, which is, hey, let's be honest. Even if we take the secular side of music out of it, it splits churches. Churches split over music.
Yeah,
it is like one of the most important things in this world, I believe, is music. And if we can find a way, how do we communicate that to people in such a way to show them that, you know, music is great, but and I love it and it's important, but man, at the end of the day, if music is separating you, then we need to figure out what that is and why, and maybe solve those issues, which I don't think we can do on this podcast because we've gone forever and a day.
Yeah, I agree. We have to use music, and like you were saying, I believe music is one of the most universal things in which we as humans can engage in.
Exactly.
And that we identify with. And it's using music, whether it's secular or sacred, in order to connect us to the divine.
Right.
And it gets to a point where, yes, we can use all the strategies and we can use all these different methods, but what is our ultimate motivation in doing so? It's to bring people to Christ and to show them Jesus.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah. And it's,
You're welcome, Justin.
I got really excited.
You are so
Reminded
welcome.
me of my Netflix queue.
I think
That's ingrained in my mind.
with anything else, there are times when you have to explain your position. Like if you listen to a certain type of music like we do, a little bit harder edged, there may be some people in the same congregation that don't understand what you're listening to.
Yeah.
And that is a point of division.
Yeah.
It could be.
No.
So sometimes it's important just to kind of confront someone and say, hey, actually the lyrical content is this, this is my way of worshiping or whatever, glorifying God, whatever you do.
But do you think we have to give an explanation of ourselves to defend our person to somebody?
I guess you are defending yourself, but I think sometimes you do. I think sometimes it helps only.
Well, I guess if you want, for me, I've done that before. It's like, you just got to listen to the lyrics. You got to listen to the lyrics. But at the end of the day, I'm like, why do I have to defend myself to this person?
Yeah.
Because if they know me, they know my heart for Christ. And this is like from a Christian side, I think, if they know my heart for Christ, why do I have to defend what I'm doing to people? Because I'm not asking everybody, well, why do you do that? Why do you do that?
I understand,
don't,
sure.
It's like, come on, we're sitting here, and like we said, let's throw this side note in. Andy has been on board with the Forgetting Walls things before it was ever an idea. We were talking about things in the very beginning. Andy was the sounding board. I would talk with Andy, lengthy talks with Andy about what was going on in my head and what I feel God was driving me to do. And all Andy ever said is, I'm there for you. I'm going to support you. So Andy knows what we're doing here. He has a very good understanding of what we're doing. So, but that's why we're here, is because I'm really tired of having people to explain themselves, because they're different from somebody else. Right. And that's the problem. That's why we're here. Everybody's different. There's no one person the same, because when I read the Bible, God said He made us unique. We're unique in creation to Him. Even twins may look the same, there's twins that look the same, but they're still different people. They're unique. So I feel like at the end of the day, if I'm explaining myself because of something I'm listening to somebody, in that sense, I'm trying to defend I feel like I don't know. For me, it's just a negative thing.
I think
if you don't explain what you're listening to, you might be a false teacher.
Oh, come on now.
That your doctrine isn't really sound.
You know what I think? I think it basically comes down to human nature, a lot of it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. It's human nature. That's
because people don't want to afford you the right or the luxury to listen to what you want to listen to. Because we're talking about music right now. They are rigid in what they believe in, maybe. Mm-hmm. And for them, they have a specific idea of what praise is, praise and worship, a church service. And if you come out of the confines of that, then somehow you are wrong, and you need to be corrected, maybe. Right,
and it's just that form of control, form of power.
Because and that's right. I think we all really need to learn to have a heart more like Jesus. You know what I mean? Be patient with each other and try to understand each other.
Yeah.
Well, let's say this. We could spend 8 podcasts talking about music. I mean,
Absolutely.
forever, and we probably never come to a conclusion. I mean, I think in general, we probably all three agree to somewhat about music and how we should look at it. I think what we should just come back to is that music is an art form. It can be used for bad things, and it can be used for good things. It can be helpful, and it can be, it can pull people down with the content and the context. I mean, you think about, I'll just equate it to like money. Money in of itself is not evil, but how
Right.
you use it
Right.
can be determined that way. So maybe we should just look at it like that.
Yeah.
That in of itself, music is amoral, but it's the people. Listen to me. The people behind it, what drives it to one side or the other. And we know there are good, bad people in the world. Technically speaking, from a other side of the wall standard,
Yeah.
but to have the motivation of using something for good or evil is going to be up to the person.
That's right.
So, yeah, I think that we spent a lot of time on the topic. I mean, we could really cover this whole line, but let's move forward in the podcast. What you say? Yeah?
Yeah. Sounds good.
How you doing over there, Justin? Are you delaying out on me?
No, I'm good.
You good? All right, good. So, do you want to go into a little pet peeve section, or do you want to do some vocabulary first?
Let's do some vocab.
Great. Well, we're not going to get too technical with vocabulary this week, and all our friends who aren't Christians, we apologize because we're really going to throw this curveball at the Christians this week with the words we've chosen to look at. We're mainly going to look at the word grace.
Grace.
Grace in conjunction with the word mercy and the word blessing. So, yeah, what do you think about that, Justin?
I don't know. Just the first thing I thought when you said grace, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Yeah.
When he's like, "Can you say grace?" Grace? She died 20 years ago.
Well, and of course, my thoughts of grace are, skit guys have a little thing, and, Tommy's playing the little guy on the stage, and Eddie's the teacher, and he goes, "We're going to talk about Grace," and he goes, "Oh, Grace, I know her. She's pretty. She makes me feel funny." But, no, I think me and Andy were talking Tuesday night, and the word grace came up, and it was an interesting conversation that we had. But I think when he was talking to me about grace or how people look at grace, I think the question he asked was, do you think God's grace is in proportion to how your faith to God, And,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was an interesting question because when he was saying that, the first thing I thought was like, man, it sounds a lot like I have to do a little work for God's grace, and then at the end of the day I said, well, and we talked about it, and then my point is that God's grace is God's grace. There is no extra grace. There's no more grace. God poured out all his grace through Christ on the cross, so
Right.
at that moment, God's grace, which is infinite, we can't fathom how great it is. He gave it all to us at once.
Right.
The silly little youth or Sunday school acronym we use for grace is, God's riches at Christ's expense. So God gave everything he had to human beings because of what Christ did for us, So it was
Right.
one time, it's like, and I was telling Andy, it's kind of like the idea of our church words, sanctification and justification. You're justified, but there's this process of sanctification. There's these processes that, you may be blessed throughout your life or whatever, but, God's grace was once and for all. It was literally I guess in our Christian circles, grace literally means, and I think in any circle, grace, I guess the basic on the street terminology is getting something you don't deserve. You got this, but you didn't deserve it. So that's grace. Well, I'm giving you grace. I'm giving you something that you actually don't deserve.
Right. And then you can get into different definitions of grace, such as, that like saving grace is what we're given through Jesus,
Yeah.
and that Christ's righteousness is imputed to us. And then you have different definitions of like common grace,
Yeah,
where it's sort of grace given to everyone, regardless of whether or not you believe.
right.
But it's this concept of, like you said, being given something that you didn't deserve.
Right, and see, and that was, and me and Andy were talking about that as well. We talked about grace and mercy, and then mercy, on the flip side, is not kind of like the opposite of grace. That where grace is you're getting something you don't deserve. Mercy is not getting something you do deserve. It's like,
Yeah.
and because of God giving His mercy, He gave His grace, and then you're blessed. Because I feel that God blesses everybody. I don't think that people necessarily see that, but I think the blessing part is those little things like you wake up in the morning, you're blessed. Where people go, well, that's just life. But I feel that's God allowing me to wake up in the morning. And I figure everybody who wakes up tomorrow morning who gets life, God's giving you that day, whether they believe it or not.
Right.
So and mainly in these circles, I just don't think grace should be thrown out there and as in conjunction with the word blessing. I think blessing and grace are two very different things. And I think that's what I wanted to say. It was like God's grace was literally grace was Jesus.
Right, yeah.
When Christ died and when He was resurrected, that was the grace. There's nothing more God can do for us in the totality of grace than what He did in that moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just what I wanted to touch on in our little vocab segment. I mean, if you're going to use grace, think about what it is. I mean, it's not. I mean, I know there's people named Grace. That's always a joke in the church. What do you know about Grace? Oh, she's sitting down at the end of the aisle. Yeah, yeah, that's funny and all. But I mean, legitimately, when we think about grace and specifically God's grace, what does that really mean? And it was all poured out right there on Calvary in the resurrection.
And like you said, it's unmerited and it's purely God's, and it's abundant and limitless, and it saves me every day. So,
and on the flip side of the thing, I mean, for those who don't get it or don't believe in it, there's a level I think that human beings should have grace as well for others. I mean, we should have grace for we should be able to show. I feel like we should be able to show people grace through the grace that was given to us. I mean, at least as a Christian, that I think that's why we at Forgetting Walls say humans are humans. I mean, they're people. They're people. They're not projects. So
right.
If that's a person and I'm a person, I should extend to them what's been extended to me. Which I don't always do, but I mean that's the concept that we should be striving for.
Right, that should be the goal, because after all, I mean, we're all saved by that grace. You know what I mean? And you have to think about how fortunate or blessed, if you want to call it that, we are every single day because of what Christ did at the cross. It's amazing. It really is, and I agree with you. I think we as Christians need to show that more.
Absolutely. So, anything else you want to add on that topic there, Snowboy?
I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I don't think that we can cover in this amount of time.
No, I don't think so either. I know we're running long, we're running short on time here, but
yeah.
Did you want to cover the article in this segment, or do we want to save it? What do you want to do?
We can save it for next week.
All right, we'll do that. I do want to. Hey, I can't leave a podcast without talking about a little bit of football. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I know Justin don't like it, but guess what? Carolina Panthers won.
Oh yeah.
Yay. They're
Go Panthers.
Gosh, what time is it? It's. We probably don't have to admit the time, but they're getting ready to start
almost
playing.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, almost 5 o'clock. So there should be a game getting ready to start up. Let's see. Dallas won last week, and probably one of the most
controversial.
I do not listen, people. You can hate me for it. I do not like the Dallas Cowboys, and last week was my proof of it. I'm not going to say anything derogatory about the owner and money and referee. But Detroit should have won that game. But Dallas won, so props to them. They play Green Bay this week. Seattle and Carolina, of course, played this week. The Ravens beat the Steelers. Did not see that coming, but
Ooh, go Ravens!
Yeah. Joe Flacco stepped up, but they play the Pats tonight. So
go Ravens,
go Pats, go Pats. And then the other AFC game is Denver and Indianapolis. So we'll see how those work out.
Yeah, that's obviously an interesting
Yeah.
matchup
By
because
the-
of quarterbacks.
Yeah, by the time everybody hears this podcast, though, those games will be settled.
Yeah, that's true. That's
So
true, yeah.
I'm going to make some brave picks this week. So by the time you hear this, you can go, "Oh, Keith, you're a dummy." But I'm going to pick Carolina over Seattle, just because.
Ooh.
Hey, I'm a St. Louis Rams fan, okay? I'm a sad. I would love to see that happen, yes.
So yeah, I'd like to see. I think Carolina. I'm gonna go with the odds on this one and take Denver over Indy. I'm pulling for the Pats over Ravens, and well, it's the Cowboys. I don't care how much they're favored.
Green Bay, right?
Green Bay's going to
There
win.
you go. That's right.
I can't go against
Packers.
Rodgers. Go Packers. Don't forget, also, by the time you listen to this, if you listen to this on early Monday, guess what's happening Monday night? The first ever FBS championship playoff game is happening with the Oregon Ducks and Ohio State. I know why excuse me, people. I know why Justin is pulling for Oregon because he loves the mascot. But
Woo!
I'm going to
Go
take
Ducks!
I'm going to take Oregon because I think they're just a better team.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. It's all about the mascot, though, isn't it?
Oh yeah. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah. So
It
between
makes things so much more interesting.
All right, come on, but have you seen the Ohio State mascot, the Buckeye? Or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call dude? He looks like Stewie, all grown up from Family Guy. Yeah, I can't go with Ohio State. Just don't like them,
Right.
even though they've had some good players. But anyways, we've had a long podcast. We want to thank everybody for listening this week. We apologize for our, I don't know, just being who we are some days. But yeah, we want to thank Andy who come on today, and he sat with us and gave us a lot of good stuff, man.
Well,
We
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We'll have him
It's
on
an
again.
honor.
Definitely, we'll
Certainly.
have Andy back on again.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Justin, you need to stay warm.
Yep.
Any shout outs this week?
Um.
Sherry Davis, big shout out.
Woo! Well, I gave her a shout out last week.
But I gave her a shout out this week.
All right, go for it. I'm not stopping you.
That's good stuff.
I better shout out to my girls at home.
Yeah.
Catherine,
Oh.
Shannon, Paigey, I love you all. And I will be home soon.
Yeah, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Forgetting Walls podcast this week. I'm Keith.
And I'm Justin.
And we
And
want
I'm Andy.
Yeah, don't forget Andy. And we want to remind you that
Still,
all day.
all day,
All day.
every day.
Never forget it. Just want to remind you that people are not projects, they're people. So love them like you love yourself, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Forgetting Walls podcast. If you're subscribing to us on iTunes, leave us a rating to help us spread the word about this podcast. Remember, the only way this works is if you share your story. So be sure to visit the website and leave us a comment at forgettingwalls.com, or find us on Twitter at forgettingwalls and facebook.com/forgettingwalls.
Peace!